Well, folks. The first round went so well, so let's go for a second. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Soul Session. Steve Tortorello of Warrior Wrestling. Steve, welcome back.
Thank you, Ben. I'm happy to be here.
It's always great to have you back, pal. Well, so just for our viewers who may have not been in for the first episode, which I do recommend you check out, reintroduce us to Warrior Wrestling.
Sure. Warrior Wrestling is an independent wrestling promotion here in the United States, in Chicago, in the Midwest. We've been in operation since 2018. We like to fashion ourselves as somewhat of the term super indie, in the sense that we like to bring in national stars that people know and want to see, and bring them to you in an up close and personal setting. So being able to meet them in our fan fest, see them wrestle from 20 feet away in a small venue, and then also introducing some new stars that we think are going to be major players in the next coming years. So that's us. We try to put on incredible shows with different types of wrestling, a little bit of lucha, a little bit of brawling, a little bit of technical, a little bit of modern indie, and put together kind of a buffet of wrestling for the fans in our area.
Absolutely, you've done absolutely well job, I must say. Speaking of your champions as well, because you've had Will Ospreay, Thunder Rosa, and your luchador champion is Sam and Adonis as well. But you've had some changes since we've last spoke. Will Ospreay was defeated by Casey Navarro to become your Warrior Wrestling champion, and Thunder Rosa sadly had to relinquish her championship due to injury, and Athena picked up your women's championship. I just want to talk about your new champions, because last time you were very praisable of Thunder Rosa and Will Ospreay. So I just want to talk about having Casey Navarro and Thunder Rosa Athena as your champion.
Sure. Casey is one of those guys that we think is a star of the next wave, so to speak. He has every piece of the puzzle. He can talk, he can work, he's got the look, he's got the swagger, he's got the presence. We really see KC as the total package. And just recently this week, his MLW contract came up, and so now he's a free agent. And so we think Casey has a lot of prospects going forward. And again, that's I talked a moment ago about big stars you know and have seen and want to meet up close, and people you don't know yet that are going to be big stars. Our main title going from Will Ospreay to Casey Navarro is exactly that transition, right? From someone who is known and established as one of the best wrestlers in the world to someone that we think will be in that conversation in a couple of years. And so that's Warrior Wrestling. It's a juxtaposition of known commodities, known greatness, and that greatness that's rising. And then you mentioned Athena as well. So Athena obviously is in the category of being a known commodity, right? She's tearing it up on AEW. She was Ember Moon in WWE. We think that she is just infinitely talented. I don't know how much your audience watches week in and week out on Dynamite, but if she is in a match on Dynamite or Rampage, you can tell she's the best person in that ring pretty much every time she's in there. From an athleticism standpoint, from a work rate standpoint, from a presence standpoint, her entrances are elaborate and incredible. Like Casey Navarro, she's somebody that is the total package. And Sam Adonis is still our lucha champion. Sam's another one of those guys that we think is an unfound great star. It boggles our mind that WWE or Impact or All Japan or AEW aren't knocking down his doors just yet. And we're lucky for the time that we have with him. But another person who's all parts of the package. He can talk. He's got the look. He knows the wrestling. He knows the fans. When he walks through the curtain, this guy is a star. So we're really, really happy with the champions that we've got going right now. And we'll see what happens in the future with those belts.
Exactly. You never know in the world of wrestling. I mean, the champions you've got now really are that total package. I want to talk a wee bit about the past as well. Will Ospreay dropping the belt to Casey Navarro. Will we ever see Will Ospreay maybe back in Warrior in sometime in the future?
Absolutely. Probably not anytime soon. To be totally honest, Will's very booked up for 2022. And he's also dialing back the amount of dates that he takes. And that for personal reasons and just professional reasons, he's not putting himself out there as much going forward. But Will's a good friend, as well as being a great representative for Warrior. So probably in 2023 at some point, the Commonwealth Kingpin will return.
It's always great to see the Kingpin in the ring. And moving on to Thunder Rosa, sadly, obviously, she had to relinquish the Warrior Championship. And further down the line, she did become the AEW Women's Championship, but sadly had to step away back from injury. Now, I remember our last conversation we had, which was a really thing that resonated with me, was treating these people, the wrestlers, as people, and always remembering that there's a face behind the performance. And we've seen people do these nasty and non-true comments about Thunder Rosa as well. And it's just, it must be hard for yourself to see someone that you talk so close about her, and then just seeing all these things happen to her. I just want to talk about that and just feel like, how do you feel seeing all this nasty stuff going around Thunder?
Yeah, so honestly, this time around, I'm not reading a lot of it just purposely because I don't want to read it. But you're right. You know, you and I talked last time when people say things about people that I know who they are, what their character is, and what they're like, and people attack them, bash them, say untrue things about them. It gets me really riled up. Like you can attack me, that's fine, but if you attack somebody that I know is a good person and you lie about them and say things that aren't true about them, that really kind of gets me going. And so over the last many months, I've actually really disengaged a lot from reading a lot of that because there's just so much negativity
Mhm.
on social media. One of the things I joke with our team is anytime we post something, whether it's on Twitter or Facebook or whatever, I'm always like, guys, don't read the comments. Don't read the comments because it'll just make you upset. But there's like a natural draw, like, oh, I want to see. Don't read the comments. Just post the stuff, walk away, and then be done with it. And so that's kind of been my attitude as of late with socials. So I haven't seen a lot of that Rosa backlash, and frankly, I don't want to
Mm.
because again, I know Mel Cervantes, the person, and I know her work ethic, and I know her professionalism, and so I don't want to get myself riled up by watching people say terrible things about her.
Very much so. Just, even if it's out there, don't acknowledge it and let it be. That then be them hateful selves, but we know the person and wish them all the best. And I want to say here, on the record from Wrestling Republic and myself, to Thunder Rosa, we wish you all the best with your recovery, and we hope you see in the back of the ring soon.
Yep.
Moving on, you actually had a wee nice deal as well. Pro Wrestling TV, you had a nice wee streaming deal with them now. And I know how we talked about Fight last time. So I just want to talk about how that deal between Pro Wrestling TV came about for yourselves.
Sure. So Pro Wrestling TV has been talking to us for, probably 6 or 8 months now, since the start of the year, really, when they knew they were going to launch in late spring. We were one of the first groups that they came to about being part of the platform. At the time, all of our live events were on Fight, and all of our VODs were housed in the High Spots Wrestling Network. And High Spots is going through some of its own changes, and kind of its format is shifting, et cetera. So we were definitely looking for a home for our library content, for our video on demand. And we weren't quite sure yet if we were going to look for a new home for live events. But we made the deal with PWTV in the spring to house all of our video on demand. So we are on their streaming channel. We're on demand on their website and on their app as well. And they've been very interested since the start of the year in getting our live events on their platform as well. And we're very happy with Fight. We love our relationship with Fight. They're professionals, they work really well, et cetera. But PWTV has been very persistent and they've been great people, and they've shown us over the months how serious they are and how well structured their organization is and what plans they have for the future. And they presented us this summer with a long plan of what they'd like to do with Warrior Wrestling. So I think, at the end of the day, nothing against Fight. We love our relationship with Fight, but PWTV has shown that they really want to invest in Warrior Wrestling and grow it and be a partner with us and make us one of the key brands on their growing platform. So we're taking a chance and jumping into a lesser known platform from Fight to PWTV because of the amount of investment they've shown in us, not just financially, but they're invested in our content and in growing us going forward. And I think they're going to be an incredible partner for us. They've got Women's Wrestling Army, they've got Control Your Narrative, they've got dozens of other programs. They're one of the pay-per-view affiliates for AAA in the United States. So I think it's really an opportunity to get in on the ground floor as something is going to build and grow. So we're really excited about that.
Oh yeah, it seems like a great service as well. If I checked out on the App Store, but there's other major, like it's everywhere. You've got a mobile device or anything like that, you can get Pro Wrestling TV, and I would recommend all our viewers to check it out. There is a lot of great stuff there on there, including Warrior as well. So definitely do give it a check out, guys. Now I want to move on to your Stadium Series because I know that was going to return this year. Yep. And you had some great matches lined up with your champion Casey Navarro. Sky Blue was going to face Tessa Blanchard as well. And then you made out a statement saying that due to some unforeseen circumstances that the event was pulled. Yep. I was wondering if you're able to detail as much as you can just what happened there with the whole Stadium Series.
Happy to be as transparent as it possibly can be. It was a combination of some business things and some personal things. So on the business end, we had been running so many shows. We did 7 shows in 6 months, which is a lot for us because we all have full-time jobs and families, and a lot of our team has kids, et cetera. And we'd been touring around the Midwestern United States. So we were in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We were in South Bend, Indiana twice. We were in Indianapolis, Indiana. We were in St. Louis, Missouri. And so then we came back and did a show in downtown Chicago across from the United Center. And we were just working ourselves so hard that we we kind of got out over our skis, so to speak, in a sense of we didn't leave ourselves enough time to properly promote the Stadium Series. I don't know that we put together the right combination of what our audience wanted to see. And then on top of that, it was only 3 weeks after a show that we had done in the area at the United Center at Warrior Wrestling 24. So I was actually away on a family trip for a week in early July, and I got back, and our ticket sales numbers weren't where we needed them to be. And there were a couple other business indicators that were like, wow, this, something's not clicking with this. And then we had some burnout among our staff at Warrior. And then on top of that, literally the same day, my wife, she's now 7.5 months pregnant. She was 5.5 months pregnant at the time, came down with a terrible case of COVID. And so we were 7 days out from the show. And I was like, all right, well, my wife has terrible COVID right now. I'm probably going to get COVID in the next couple of days. How do we run this show if I'm sick and I'm out for COVID? Can I run it remotely by assigning things to other people? But the rest of our staff is burned out and overstretched right now. The business indicators aren't looking great for this show. Another personal thing too, we were in the process of selling a house and moving, et cetera. All of this kind of hit in the same 5-hour span. And I sat down to try to figure out all right, I got to put all the finishing touches on how we're going to do this show next week. And then it just hit me. We can't do this show next week. There are just too many things that could go wrong or that we're stretched too thin. We just can't do it. And the last thing in the world we want to do is power through just because we said we were going to and end up not doing good business and not being able to pay the wrestlers what they're owed, or hurting our staff and stretching them too thin. Or if I was sick with COVID, forcing everybody to do all the things that I would do to run a show and putting them in a position where they're uncomfortable or things aren't working. So we had to decide, you know what, we've got to let this one go. And that killed me. Because anybody that knows me knows that if we say we're going to do a thing, come hell or high water, we do that thing. So we canceled the July show. And honestly, as we were kind of going through all that and reflecting on that, oh gosh, our show is canceled, and we were talking about August and September, we made the decision, you know what? It actually makes sense to just take a couple months off. That's really what all of us in our crew needed. And so instead of trying to force it and saying, well, we're off in July, but we're just going to take a couple months off, and we're going to come back big in the fall. So that's where we are now. We're coming back with Warrior 25 on October 2nd, and we're coming back big, right? We're back at Marian Catholic where we began. We've got the Lucha Brothers, we've got the Briscoe Brothers, we've got Eddie Kingston, we've got Casey Navarro, who we talked about earlier, defending the title against the heart and soul of Warrior Wrestling, Trey Miguel, who's a former champion. So we are really proud of this show that we built for October 2nd, and now we're back.
Yeah, you're back bigger and better than ever, as they say. I do want to talk about Warrior 25. I'm very interested for this whole show. It's definitely going to be an absolute true experience. One of my favorite matches I'm really excited for is the Lucha Bros versus Brian Cage and Gringo Lungo as well. Also, as well, we know that originally the plan was the Lucha Brothers versus the Briscoes. And then you put out a statement saying that some representatives from AEW/Ring of Honor were a bit like, hey, can you not? I just want to talk about what happened there. Was it okay, I understand, but it's a shame to pull this match.
Yeah. So long story short, usually we have a great working relationship with AEW, and we're in contact with the people in their office for talent relations anytime we use any of their talent, talking about matches, what we can do, what we can't do. I think one of the complicating factors is that Ring of Honor is a new brand, and Ring of Honor as a small new brand that has run 2 shows and isn't up and running yet, it doesn't have the same. It's kind of odd because it's a separate company, but it's the same main owner, but it's not the same company. And it didn't have in place all of the specific protocols and things that talent would normally go through for match approval, et cetera. So long story short, some wires got crossed kind of internally that we had approval for the matches. And then as that, information got to different places, people went, oh, no, actually there isn't approval. And so we had to have a conversation with the AEW folks, who were incredibly gracious, always. Again, I can't say enough good things about working with the AEW office. They're awesome. And so had a conversation with them, and we changed that matchup because obviously it's something, they didn't say this, but everybody knows it's something they want to keep, I guess, in their back pocket, whether for Ring of Honor in the future or if the Briscoes ever were to come to AEW. And so as part of that discussion with them, they want to make sure that we're doing well. So the discussion became, hey, how about Eddie Kingston comes out to Warrior Wrestling as a big bonus for the Warrior fans? So we'll take it. You know, we're happy to have the Mad King on the show. He's going to have an incredible slobber knocker with Calvin Tankman. And you know, at the end of the day, no big drama, no big fight, anything like that. Just, I think, some growing pains for the Ring of Honor brand and its talent as far as how those things happen. And on our end, we ended up with a bonus great star on the show.
Yeah, I mean, hell, Eddie Kingston, that is quite a catch there for your show. You must have been over the moon hearing Eddie was going to come to Warrior.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I mentioned a moment ago, Trey Miguel being the heart and soul of Warrior Wrestling. In many ways, Eddie Kingston has been the heart and soul of AEW for the last couple of years, right? He debuted as part of Cody's Open Challenge that was supposed to be a one-off, and the world got to see what all of us independent wrestling fans have known for forever, that this guy's special. And so he was supposed to be on a one-off in July of 2020. He ended up main eventing Full Gear in November of 2020 in this great feud with Mox, and then just becoming a central character to everything AEW does. So, you know, you see the way that the audiences react in AEW shows when he comes out, because he is that heart and soul, that honest, sincere character. Yeah, it's great to have great wrestlers. It's great to have people who flip and flop and fly, etc. Eddie's a brawler, and Eddie's a guy who goes out and fights with his heart. And so I think that's going to be a really special element to our show. So we're thrilled to have him be part of Warrior 25.
Yeah, I truly cannot wait to see Eddie Kingston in the ring. It's going to be an absolute joy. And as well, another match you've got on the show as well, Sky Blue versus Queen Anita as well. I just want to talk about women's wrestling as well. Obviously, Sky Blue is a Chicago native as well in the area. And I just want to talk about people seem to like tune out of women's wrestling, and they don't feel like it's maybe properly given the time of day. So I just want to know, as a company owner, how do you feel about like giving women's wrestling more time and making sure it's not treated as something like the people call the toilet break match, or like just the second match on the card? How do you treat that as an owner?
Yeah, so I think part of it comes from people will, your crowd will follow what you say is important. And so from day one, we had 2 women's matches on the very first Warrior show. We had Chelsea Green versus Deonna Purrazzo, and we had Tessa Blanchard versus Santana Garrett. And those were 2 of the most beloved matches on the first show we ever did. And from then onward, we've had a huge focus on women's wrestling. So if you're a promotion, whether a national promotion, a small promotion like ours, if you say from the start, this thing matters, whether it's lucha style or women's matches or a specific title you develop, if you teach your audience it matters, your audience will come along with you. Or often they'll find you because they think it matters as well. So the people who don't like women's wrestling, they're not going to come to an indie show or another show that features a lot of women's wrestling, because that's not what they like. But the people who do, they're going to come out and they're going to be passionate and they're going to be invested. You know, some of the most raucous crowds we've ever had in our history have been for women's matches. Kylie versus Tessa, Tessa versus Britt Baker, Athena versus AQA with Frank the Clown in her corner in Grand Rapids was on fire for that whole match. So for us, we've established from the beginning, women's wrestling matters and it will be featured here, and our audience agrees. There are people who don't agree, like you said, that that's their time to use the toilet or go get some popcorn if they're at one of those national shows. I think at the indie level, it's different, though. I think the indie fan believes in wrestlers and wrestling. And if you're going to pay your money and come out to an indie wrestling show, you're probably not the kind of person who's going to disrespect a women's match.
No, yeah, I completely agree with you there. Just talk about that as well, indie fans and like obviously like the big mainstream fans. Do you feel like you see a clear difference, or do you feel like it's subtle differences, but it's very like, oh, I can actually notice that they're an indie fan and they're sort of like the mainstream audience?
Great question. I think that you can notice the subtle differences. So, for example, AEW's audience is primarily that indie audience that also loved New Japan in 2016, 17, 18, and liked Impact when it was the big alternative in 16, 17, 18, and they liked Ring of Honor. That audience became AEW's audience. And I actually think it's interesting because that's the audience, as I just said, that tends to like women's wrestling. Yet for some reason, as you mentioned, for AEW, women's wrestling doesn't translate well on TV. It's the lowest rated segment. They only get 1 segment on Dynamite, etc. And honestly, I think as an honest critique, that comes back to the promotion. If the promotion tells you something is important and it matters, the crowd will follow along with it. And AEW has told us for a couple of years now that women's wrestling is a segment 8 at 9:20 p.m. Eastern time match before your main event. And that's how the crowd has responded. Whereas I will give WWE kudos for the last 5-6 years. They have made women's wrestling a centerpiece of what they do. And a lot of that credit goes to Paul Levesque, to Triple H. And so their crowd buys women's wrestling as main event level wrestling. So all that to say, there are different nuances between the different audiences, and we can definitely tell when there's casual fans who are only there for the people that they see on TV versus hardcore indie fans who are watching the other shows, going to the other shows. And we often have a lot of conversations internally at Warrior over who our fans are, who are the various audiences that are there at a Warrior show. And so that's constantly shifting too. So the makeup of our audience is different in 2022 than it was in 2018. So yeah, who your audience is and what they like and what they care about is something as a promoter and a booker you constantly have to be thinking about and listening to. And sometimes you book a match that you think is going to kill, and then there's way more families in the audience than you thought, and it fell flat. Or sometimes you book a match that you think is like, this is just, it's going to be fun, but it'll just be there, and it gets over crazy. And you're like, well, why is that? Who was in the audience? It's a constant game of different people mixing into the audience.
No, I could definitely see that as well. It's always kind of hard to gauge the crowd. Like, I've put on this excellent card. Oh wait, but the audience there is not actually their type, and you've got to maybe fly about it, or just make some changes, or just go with your guts and go with it. Talking about AEW's women matches, you said there, is there any way as a promoter you could see maybe it being elevated to main event status? Because they've definitely got the stars there as well, including your champion Athena.
Yeah, and it comes from them deciding they're going to make it. Right. And so AEW has done a very good job of building new stars that they saw as the future over the last 3 years. So whether that's Darby Allin, that's Jungle Boy, that's Sammy Guevara, they're giving these folks time to build more and more and more, so that they're not ratings draws right now when they started, but as they built them, they got more and more time and became ratings draws and became stars. I think you do the same thing with the women's division. I think you need to create clear stars. Obviously, they made Britt Baker during the pandemic, and she made herself as a big star. They need to commit to that, though. Instead of just, honestly, again, critique of AEW, they cycle through about 15 or 16 different women who all go into a various tag match once a week on Dynamite, and there's not really a consistent through line. You can't make everybody all at once. But if I were talking to Tony, I would say you need to decide for the next 3 months who are the 5 women you're going to focus on and make stars. And those 5 women should get very consistent, very developed TV time. And then you make them stars. And then you rotate in a few other people. But it all comes back to, what you tell the audience matters. When's the last time Toni Storm is the women's champion? Has she had a solo promo in the ring? Has she had a main event? Has she, you tell your audience that it matters by the way you place it. So my suggestion to them would be, if making women's wrestling draw matters to the AEW team, they've got to commit the time to it in their programming.
Yeah, definitely as well. Definitely give them that main event status as well, and not just chucking all 4 women in another fatal 4-way just after we get it on a pay-per-view as well. Definitely try and build storylines as well, and let them be engaged with the audience and actually know who they are and what the whole circumstances of their feud's going as well. Because I know your champion Athena recently went against Jade Cargill, and I was very excited for this match as well. And a lot of people thought she was going to break Jade's undefeated streak. However, the match didn't go entirely a lot of people thought. It was very short, and it just ended, and Athena didn't win. I just want to know, from your point of view, seeing your champion in that situation, how did you feel?
Well, so I can separate the fan versus the person who understands the business. Their focus in that segment on All Out was they wanted to continue that Jade Cargill is undefeated, unbelievable, undefeatable. And Athena's role was to make her look like $1 million. So Athena went out and did her job, did it very, very well. In that case, she did her job very well. But that's the story. They've decided to tell the story that Jade is unstoppable. I know, knowing Athena, knowing her work, that she is capable of carrying a whole program built around her and her story, right? She's got the acting chops, she's got the promo chops, she's got the wrestling chops, she's got the presence, she's got all of it. So I would like to see her more featured, because I think she could be a superstar for them. And I think I hope they do that in the future. But that's just not what they chose to focus on. Their focus right now is that Jade is unstoppable. So yeah, I was a little disappointed that Athena didn't win. Obviously, as a fan, I thought she did a great job in what she was tasked to do that night. but I'd like to see them take the shackles off and let her go. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And that's a conversation we have with a lot of different AEW talents, and it's a good problem to have, in the sense that AEW has a million great wrestlers, 40 of whom could all be the centerpiece of a national weekly TV program. And it's hard to juggle them. So, I would almost like to see, and people have talked about this, I would almost like to see a roster split or something, or there's been scuttlebutt about an all elite women show, whether that's a reality show or a wrestling show. I would love to see something where people like Athena could get more time to show at the national level what they can do.
I definitely agree with you there. I know WWE had their Evolution all women's pay per view, and I know NWA has been doing did an all women's show. I believe it was Empowered. It was called as well. So there's definitely is a great. You can definitely allow these women to have their 2 hours on a Wednesday night to themselves, and you could easily pull out some bangers there as well. I want to talk about as well as undefeated streaks. I don't know how you feel about personally, but I feel like they can be a double-edged sword. They can help build up one person, but like say Goldberg and Kevin Nash, you could get cow prodded, and then it's just a bit of a dud. Do you feel as a promoter that they can be a bit of a double sword, undefeated streaks?
Yeah, well, and I think too what they do is they oftentimes telegraph the finish of a match, right? So maybe Athena was going to beat Jade, but probably not. If I see Jade wrestle on Dynamite or Rampage at any time in the next 3 months, Jade's going to win. I know that, right? So there's the positive is you've built this person up as an unbeatable star. The negative is you've kind of backed yourself into a corner with what you can do with them story-wise. You really can't, because so much storytelling, set aside wrestling, whether it's a novel, a song, a play, a book, a movie, etc. Storytelling is about loss and redemption and ups and downs and arcs. And when you have a character that only wins, it's difficult to tell connected stories with them, because it's repetitive. They win. To care about a character, that character has to lose and grow and change. And so that's why I can't name a streak in wrestling that ended in a way that people were happy with, right? Goldberg got cattle prodded. Ryback lost to Punk in the Shield in a mess in the Hell in a Cell. The Undertaker lost in a clunky match to Brock Lesnar that no one expected him to lose. I can't name a streak that Asuka lost to Charlotte at WrestleMania. Maybe that one, but I can't name a streak where you were like, wow, that led to the right ending. Streaks are cool while they're going on, and then it gets old, and then I've never seen someone capitalize it in a great way.
It's definitely one of those gimmicky storylines. It's a great start, but has a bit of a flunked finish. Never truly the best.
Well,
I want to talk about.
Oh, go ahead.
On you go. No, on you go.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think, the streak or the element of a streak is so valuable that it has to be, you have to find a way to transfer that value to the person who ends that streak. And in all the cases that I just listed, the value never got transferred, right? So Nash was an old guy who beat Goldberg with a cattle prod. That didn't elevate Kevin Nash. Punk in the Shield and a schmaz with Ryback. Punk was already the champion. They were already there. Undertaker, Lesnar. Lesnar was already Lesnar. Like he didn't become any more of a Lesnar monster by beating Undertaker. So in all of those cases, the momentum never transferred. And the key of a streak gimmick is you have to have a plan for how you're going to transfer that momentum.
Yeah, very much so. It's definitely good for building stars. Like Jade obviously was built right into a star, but then it can also, as we said before, it can sort of flounder and not really be good. So it's definitely a really good starting point, but you should really aim for having a good finish with a streak storyline.
Agreed.
And now I want to talk about marketing for a wee bit, because I know that you guys like to announce your shows during Dynamite. I know that's mostly because you probably have AEW guys on, but do you feel like that's when the hardcore fans are really active during Dynamite? They're on social medias and all these Reddit pages as well, just checking out stuff. And do you feel like, as a businessman, that's a good marketing capture point to get people to focus on your product?
Absolutely. So that used to be during, we started in 2018 to 2019. We did all of our marketing on Monday nights during Raw. And the reality is that the AEW audience is much more likely to come to an independent wrestling event because that's more of their world, right? They know independent wrestling. A lot of them do. They've followed it. The AEW stars have come from the indies. So our core audience is now more the AEW audience. They used to be watching Raw. Some of them still watch Raw, but now it's really the AEW audience. So as far as engagement, as far as comments, retweets, likes, spreading, ticket sales, all of that spikes during AEW programming. And so that's why we do a lot of announcements during Dynamite, a little bit during Rampage as well. But yeah, that's when everybody, even if I weren't a promoter, if I weren't a booker, on Wednesday night, I'd be watching TV and scrolling through Twitter as seeing what people are saying about what I'm seeing.
It's a very easy time to capture, that audience. Like, oh, I'm watching a Punk match, but oh, wow, this is something else that in that area as well. I can definitely go and check that out. It works very well business-wise.
Exactly.
Now, I want to talk about, as a fan and, again, as a businessman owner, since we talked quite a lot of shit's hit the fan, Vince McMahon retired from the WWE. First of all, I want to get, as a fan opinion, what's your thoughts on that? That's quite a hell of a thing. I never thought I would see it in my lifetime.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating thing, right? Like, same thing. I thought he would die in the chair. And 2 months before he was out, Paul Levesque was out, Triple H was out, Stephanie was out. It seemed like there had been a succession plan building for many years to Stephanie and Paul. And then this year was like, nope, Stephanie and Paul, you're both out. And then Vince was out, and then the succession plan swung back to Stephanie and Paul. So it's so interesting. I believe in Triple H's vision for wrestling. I think the original NXT from 2014 through 2017, I thought was almost unbeatable wrestling. And so you can acknowledge all the great that Vince did and be thankful for it, but also know it's time for a change. And it has been time for a change for years because I think WWE has kind of devolved into just serving all of Vince's weirdest whims. And so now that Triple H is in charge, I'm excited to see what happens. I'm cautiously optimistic that the biggest brand of wrestling in the world will get back to good wrestling and good shows.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think a lot of people have noticed change as well. I remember that Drew McIntyre promo with Kevin Owens, and he just went off, and it was pure raw emotion and heart as well. As a business, do you notice subtle changes as well, like with the fans?
Oh yeah. Well, I think, and to be totally honest with you, I found WWE programming unwatchable for the last several years. And that's not like you don't like the stars of matches, whatever, just the programming itself. I didn't like the pacing of the show. I didn't like the way it was shot. None of the characters spoke like they were human beings, right? Like they all had this weird cadence to how they spoke, and they all said the same thing. And it just was not enjoyable. Like if this was a TV show about police or lawyers or whatever, I also wouldn't watch it because it's not good. And what you just mentioned a moment ago, I think hits on the nail on the head. I felt raw human emotion from a character on a WWE show. I haven't felt that in years. And that to me is forget the matches or who's pushed or any of the wrestling stuff. Set that aside. The television show has been awful because none of them have felt like real people that you could care about for years. And now all of a sudden they feel like real people again. That is the biggest change.
Not very much so, definitely. I'm starting to love it as well, and I really never decide to stay up till 1 a.m. in the UK to watch Raw live. So I'm doing it now. So something's definitely happened.
Yeah, something's different.
I do want to touch upon just now going into Warrior Wrestling 25. Have we got any more surprises coming for the card?
Nothing major. So people shouldn't be like, oh, what major stars being added? Our major stars are the Lucha Brothers, Eddie Kingston, Briscoe Brothers, Trey, Cage, KC, etc. So the big points of the card are there. There might be a few matches added to round out the card, but the guts of it are set.
Well, we're definitely in for an absolute treat. Now, I do want to talk about someone who's been at Warrior Wrestling, the Acclaimed. The Acclaimed have been there, and I just want to know, because Matt Caster can definitely go off on the mic. Does he ever run the raps by you, or is it just basically, trust me, I got this situation?
So the show that we had then, we had the rap battle between the Acclaimed and Cage and KC. And Brian Cage got a lot of props live and online for his rap as well. They didn't run any of it by us other than just, we told them, go out there, have fun, do what you do, gave them a fist bump, and that's what we got.
Well, hey, that's it. That's all you need for the Acclaimed, because everybody loves the Acclaimed, and I'm sure I would love to see them back in Warrior sometime.
Same. And I've actually talked to both Bowens and Castor in the last couple of weeks about that. They're busy right now, as you can imagine, but we'd love to have them back, and hopefully we will soon.
Oh, great to see that. Now, something I do want to touch upon as well, as we mentioned earlier with the stadium series, you took some time off, and wrestling sort of that business that never has an off season. Do you feel like wrestling would benefit from having an off season?
Yeah, I think some of the national programs would. I get why they don't, because they're a valuable benefit to being live programming to their networks 52 weeks a year. But I think, yeah, I think it would give creative a time to reshuffle a little bit. I think it'd give people a time to heal. I think it would give the promoters and bookers a chance to see what worked. So, for example, Tony Khan books All Out. Well, he also has have an eye towards what's going the next couple of weeks after All Out, what's going towards Grand Slam. If you could take 2 weeks off after All Out and really sit back and go, what's working? What's not working? What do we need to reshuffle? Tony Khan has often talked about how he took a week and a half off in Christmas of 19 because of the way the shows fell. They didn't have a Dynamite. And he was able to reflect on their first fall of Dynamite and realize that he needed to take the reins of the show because it was kind of by committee before then, and that they needed to go in a couple of different directions. Because if you remember that they were going down the Dark Order path that was really weird and wasn't working. If Tony Khan could do that 3 times a year, right? If there were 3 times a year where he could take 2 weeks off, get an extra 5 hours of sleep, go for a run, and then sit down and with his team really reflect on what's working, what's not working, and not having to write the next show coming up, I think the shows would be even better.
Oh, absolutely as well. And I mean, I do love Tony Khan and what he's done with AEW as well. I do want to touch something as an owner of a promotion. We know during All Out Media Scrum, there was an incident with some of the wrestlers, and Tony had to make some changes. And on the Dynamite, he announced the relinquish of the AEW World Championship and the Trios Championship. And some people were giving him shit, saying he should have done something other way or this way. But I think he handled it well. I don't know, as a owner of promotion, do you feel Tony Khan handled it the best way he could with the circumstances?
You know what I always say is I'm not in the room, right? So oftentimes people will, let's say you're talking about politics and it's like, oh, well, the U.S. committed troops to this thing, but we should have done this, we should have done that. And my response is always, were you in the Pentagon? Were you in the Situation Room? Do you know what's going on the ground? Do you know what everybody can play quarterback when they only have 5% of the information. I only have 5% of the information, right? I don't know what actually happened in that fight backstage. I don't know what conversations Tony had with different people. I don't know what legal ramifications there are. I don't know, who's tied up in what. I don't know all the elements that led to it. So I honestly don't have an opinion on who should he have suspended this person or fired this person or waited on this or done that. I wasn't there, And so if I were there, I'm sure I'd have an informed opinion, but I'm on the outside. I only see a small tip of the iceberg of what's actually going on. I would like to think he handled it as best he could, but again, I don't know because I wasn't there.
Yeah, you always seem like some people always like to be like, oh, I could have done it this way and this way, but never take the background situation of you never know what actually really happened. We're all just taking that sort of, mincemeat diet information from like the dirt sheets and stuff like that. And always people are a bit too much critical and forward thinking with these kind of situations.
Absolutely. And the same always happens. So obviously in the US, I'm an American football fan, and people always want to pretend like, oh, well, the team should have done this, the team should have done that. Well, but what you didn't know is that this guy on the line had broken his ankle. And if we went that way, he was going to be weak and they were going to get through it. Like everyone thinks they know from watching, but you don't know unless you're on the ground and you know all of the conditions on the ground.
No, definitely, absolutely as well. I mean, you never really know with these sort of situations, but it's happened, and I think Tony's done the best that he can, and hopefully we can see more great stuff with AEW because I know they've got their Rap for Ash Stadium show coming up as well. I just want to know, as a fan, are you excited for that show as well?
Yeah, I think it's last year the atmosphere was unbelievable, and that's for me. I like to see a lot of people enjoying a wrestling show and having fun, and I think there's going to be 12,000 plus people at least in that show. I think it's going to be great. I think Moxley Danielson is going to be out of this world. I think we used the phrase heart and soul a couple times earlier about Trey with us, about Eddie with AEW. The other guy besides Eddie, that's the heart and soul of AEW, is Jon Moxley, right? That's a guy who. It's funny, he wasn't in the original vision for it because he wasn't available and until the very end and yada, yada, yada. But he has really become the face of that company, not the Elite, not CM Punk. Jon Moxley has been the day in, day out guy that I think the AEW fans most identify with, like alongside Eddie. And, I think the match is going to be incredible, and I think it's a testament to Moxley and Danielson as pros, what they've been able to build in this tournament in the last couple of weeks, which was all last minute.
Yeah, he's done good. We're definitely in for a treat this coming Wednesday. We'll see. We're ending the end of our time here, having you back on the show, which is always a great pleasure to have you and Warrior here. It's great to talk about it. I want to know, after Warrior 25, what can people expect from Warrior Wrestling?
Great question. So we're going to take November off, definitely. My wife's we're having a baby in early November, so I'm not doing any wrestling. Thank you very much. We're hoping to maybe do a December show, but nothing is officially on the books yet. And then next year we will be going back to South Bend. We'll be going back to Grand Rapids, probably back to Indianapolis, and then of course continuing our shows in Chicago. So we are looking forward to a very exciting 2023. We don't think 25 is going to be the last one of this year. Like I said, I think we'll do December, but we'll kind of see as we get closer on that.
Well, anyways, ladies and gentlemen, Warrior 25 is coming up. And for our viewers, Steve, how can they attend this show or view it from their homes?
Great question. WarriorWrestling.net is the website. You can buy tickets. You can find out streaming information. As we mentioned earlier, we'll be streaming on PWTV, Pro Wrestling TV. Look them up, Google them. They're on every app, every platform. Tickets for us is WarriorWrestling.net in the Chicago area. We hope people check us out. It's a Sunday afternoon. So hopefully people have some time to enjoy the show. There's going to be great action, great characters, great everything. We will not let you down, I promise.
Viewers, I'm sure Warrior won't let you down. So if you're attending that show, you have the heart and soul of a warrior, and you make sure to enjoy that show. Well, Steve, thank you for coming on, pal. It's been great having you here. Again, I've been your host. Another episode of the Solo Sessions is finished here. Remember to check out Wrestling Republic for all your wrestling needs. And have a wonderful day, everybody.